Hi, and welcome to Speaking with Speak Up for Women New Zealand. I'm Katrina, and today Michelle from Wāhine Kōrero, a Māori women's group, joins me to talk about the revised scope of practice guidelines that New Zealand's Midwifery Council have just put out, and Michelle's group's perspective on them as a Māori woman. Michelle, can you tell us a little bit about your group, how it came into being, and what your purpose is, and how people can find you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me, Katrina. Kia ora koutou katoa. That just means hello, everyone. Okay, sorry, what was the question again?
Just tell us a little bit about your group, how it came into being, what your purpose is, and just how people can find you if they want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so Wāhine Kōrero was born out of a need, or out of a perceived need for a voice, a Māori voice, to challenge the transgender agenda, basically, or gender identity agenda is, how we see it. Because we couldn't see any Māori at all, or might have been a handful, but it hasn't been consistent, pursuing this issue, because we do feel it's important. In fact, we see this particular American academic ideology as a contamination on our culture. Obviously, it's a contamination, for women and children as well.
Yeah,
for a myriad of reasons. So that's why we decided, myself and Diane Landy, we are the co-founders of Wāhine Kōrero, and our purpose is to address this issue wherever we see it, and this, the new guidelines or new proposed guidelines from the Midwifery Council is just yet another cog.
Yeah. And how can people find you if they want to get in touch with you or connect with you? How do they do that?
Yeah, sure. Look, I'll actually give you the links so you can put it in the description below, Katrina. But
We're
on Twitter. Yeah, so we're on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the link to the Twitter handle. We're also on Getter as well. I'll give you the link to that. And we're also on YouTube. That's where a lot of people follow us, actually, is on our YouTube channel. So I'll give you the link to that too, so that people can come along. Yeah, ask us questions, engage with us. We'd be more than happy to discuss. But be warned, we don't have much patience for people who think that men can give birth.
Okay, noted. So now, yes, the scope of practice that the Midwifery Council has put out. What were your first thoughts upon reading those guidelines?
Okay, so, well, first up, the claim. Actually, I'm reading from the summary of amendments. Is that okay?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So first up, the claim that, Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the Treaty of Waitangi, is embedded in the practice of I'll come back to the reo that they've used for midwife, which has changed, embedded in the practice of a midwife in Aotearoa, or in New Zealand. Now, there's a few things there. Te Tiriti o Waitangi, or the treaty, says absolutely nothing about midwifery. Okay. It certainly doesn't have the name Aotearoa, and neither does the Declaration of Independence either, might I add. New tirini was the word that our tipuna used, that our rangatira used to describe New Zealand, just in our language, but New Zealand.
What was that word again?
Oh, sorry, New tirini, so New Zealand.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. The treaty does not say anything about removing the words, wahine or mama, or woman or mother, from anywhere at any time. And the treaty certainly doesn't say that Dr. Elizabeth Kerekere is the only Māori to be consulted on matters such as these.
Right. So basically, you saying that she's assuming responsibility for talking for all Māori, and she doesn't have that authority.
Well, what I'm saying is that, look, she's more than, she can talk about it all she likes. Well, she is Māori, so she has a right to speak about her opinion.
Yeah.
But the problem is that these people are handpicked, you know, because if I'm pretty sure if you speak to other Māori, because, you know, there are 100, or last count, 103 iwi in New Zealand, 103 iwi. There is no way that one person, doesn't matter if it's Dr. Kirikiri, it doesn't matter if it's me, like I am Māori, but I can't speak for all Māori, and I never will, never have, never will. But as a Māori wahine, or as a Māori woman, I have a point of view, you know. So what I'm saying is that, you know, just to say, oh, we've consulted Dr. Elizabeth Kirikiri for an Indigenous perspective is, you know, one person.
Yeah.
To speak for all of us. She's not our rangatira. She's not our kaumātua from my hapu. My hapu haven't even heard of it. Oh, who? You know what I mean? So, this is the problem. And it's not just with, you know, gender identity. It's with a few things from what I can tell, you know. Oh, sorry, and I forgot to say, I do live in Australia and I've been here for, you know, for some time. That doesn't mean that, you know, I'm not connected to my culture or my whānau or my hapu or anything like that. You know, it just means that no matter where I am in the world, I will always be a Māori and tangata whenua. But, you know, there must be broader consultation with iwi on these matters. You know, we're talking about you know, bringing forth life. You know, only wahine bring forth life. That's the reason why only women karanga on the marae, which means to call forth, you know, visitors.
Right.
That's our culture.
Yeah. So what I'm sort of hearing here is that like Māori have always resisted the idea of being like a melting pot, you know, and that, I mean, that's more of a European thing, that we sort of put everything into a melting pot and one system and for everybody and things like that.
An umbrella.
Yes, yes, exactly. But that has not been the Māori culture. But this is what we're getting now. This is what you're getting.
Well, you know, we've always had distinct, you know, hapu and iwi. You know what? For example, Di and her hapu have a very different, not very different, sorry, I shouldn't say that, but, you know, have slightly different, you know, understandings in comparison to my hapu. And mostly because of where they, you know, where the hapu are from.
Right.
If that makes sense. And our histories, and, you know, it's very complex. It's not just, it's almost like they try and simplify it, but when you simplify an entire culture,
yes,
you know, you run the risk of, and it's happening, of making everything bland, making everything, there's no nuance.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
And
yes,
then all
the
of a sudden,
details.
that's right. And those details
are
important. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because often it's the details that define us as much as the sort of maybe the ostentatious displays of clothing that we might, ceremonial clothing that we choose to wear and things like that. Yeah, it's just the details that develop over time and history within our groups or tribes or whatever we want to call ourselves. And they can be very defining, those details.
Well, you know, sometimes if you miss it, you know, it could be connected to something quite important.
Yes, yes.
You know, like removing the word mother or, you know, woman from the documentation.
Oh,
you know,
just a minor detail.
Just, you know, it's seemingly minor, you know, they don't even have the word hapu in there, you know, anymore. Like hapu means to be pregnant. And the actual name that they are now using for midwives, it's not the word, you know, it's not the reo, the language that or the kupu that we would use normally, they've gone and called midwives now without any explanation of why they're using, these particular words.
Yes, I see that.
Yeah, and it's called kahu pokai.
Yeah.
Right, that's what they're using.
Do you know what that means?
Well, I mean, I don't really know why they chose those words. Like kahu, that can refer to, in terms of gardening, germinating, seedlings. It can also refer to fetus, and not just human, or stillborn.
Okay.
So,
so fairly broad. Yeah.
Well, it's broad, and it's dehumanizing.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's
true.
not specific. It's and then pokai means a few things actually, but in this context, I'm thinking they must mean like to gather, to collect, like a flock of birds. So what, a flock of fetuses? Yes. I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, right.
Not at all. Because the actual word, let me just grab it here, is, I've got so much information in front of me, is, whakawhānau. So whakawhānau or wāhine whakawhānau has always been used throughout documentation regarding midwifery and midwives, not just governmental, but private, as well. Whakawhānau, to give birth, childbirth, or wāhine whakawhānau.
So do you think that, sorry, carry on.
No, so I was just going to say, and so when you take, when you look at wāhine whakawhānau versus kahu pokai, like kahu pokai, there's no mention of woman, no mention of birth, and no mention of child or children. You know what I mean? Like, it makes no sense to me.
So do you think that's why they've taken the whānau off that term and have turned this into whānau care? Well, family care is what it means. But family, of course, whānau in Māori is a much broader term than family. The word family often means in English. So this is what they've sort of taken. They're now calling it is whānau care, as in they seem to have decentered or uncentered, whatever the correct word is, woman,
unravelled,
and made it this is about family, whānau, and like the woman should be the center of the universe when it comes to midwifery.
Absolutely. When a woman is giving birth, and I can tell you that myself, the entire whānau isn't giving birth, it's just you.
Yeah.
And it makes no sense. It makes no sense to consult, you don't even know the situation per, it doesn't matter even if doesn't matter. I mean, all women, doesn't matter what culture you're from, you don't know the situation with their whānau. Something could have happened. They may not even be connected to their whānau. Yeah. And then, so anyway, so I guess we should really follow the summary of amendments.
What we haven't actually sort of said yet, and what we've been speaking all around, is the fact that this scope of practice from the New Zealand Midwifery Council has removed all references, all words, let me say it again, all references to women and mothers from it.
Yep.
Everything. And it's
that's right.
Yeah. And it's reading at it from somebody who might be just trying to see what it's about. It doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense, because there's no subject to it in a way. It's just vague.
Oh, it's incredibly vague. I don't know if your audience has seen the video from or by Dr. George Parker regarding trans-centered midwifery care. But, I think when you start looking at the players involved in all of this, the purpose and the intent becomes a lot clearer. So it's what they're not saying, right?
Yeah.
So, we have, sorry, I should go back, like the email that I sent to you, this morning, Dr. George Parker is the lead investigator on a Health Research Council of New Zealand, it's funded by the taxpayer, looking at trans and non-binary inclusive pregnancy and birth care. And she actually confirms in that video that they're taking a family or whānau-centred approach to the study. So that's effectively like when, you would have heard this word framework, when they use, these, corporate, boardroom terms, to me, when I hear framework, I hear setup,
Right.
Because, they're already, so they've just come at it already. It's, centering the whānau. So already, the words, they're not even mentioning mother or woman at all. And then they blame it on Te Tiriti, on the treaty. Oh, it's because the treaty said so. Effectively is what they're saying. They're using the treaty as an excuse for all this, and I'm sorry to say this, but I have to say it, bullshit that they're espousing, and we are, as Wāhine Kōrero, furious.
Good. Glad to hear it. More women should be getting furious about this, to be honest, because I looked on the rest of their website, and the rest of the website does mention women and mothers. But of course, my first thought is, well, how long is it going to be before they start disappearing those words from the rest of their website as well? They've already disappeared them from one page. So how easy is it going to be to say, oh, well, now we should include that framework for the rest?
It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time, Katrina, And sorry, I should have carried on, getting back to my point about when you know who the players are involved in all of this, Dr. Parker then talks about how there's been a institutionalized or institutional collaboration, and that's why institutions are captured by this agenda. And then she names in Victoria University, Wellington, Otago Polytechnic School of Midwifery, Professor Sally Baddock, who is there at the Polytechnic in Otago, and a Doctor of Philosophy, Suzanne Miller. And also Dr. Parker names Dr. Jamie Veal of Waikato University, Hamilton, who is, among other things, president of PATHA and secretary of WPATH.
And do you want part of this? Just explain what they are. Those things are.
Well, WPATH. WPATH is the word. Yes, sorry. No, you say it because I'm just furious.
I think so. WPATH, if I've got this right, is the World Professional Association for Transgender Healthcare. And PATHA is the Professional Association of Transgender Healthcare, Aotearoa. Right.
What is he doing in there? That's got nothing to do with giving birth, nothing to do with midwifery whatsoever.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Yeah. So it seems and this is not just in relation to this thing, but I've noticed it with others as well. There just seems to be this like cozy consultation practice going on where the same people, now I know New Zealand is a small place, but the same people are consulted over and over and over again when as soon as the word transgender appears, something anywhere, it's like they bring in the same cohort of consultants to consult over everything. And of course, they've all got the same thing to say every time.
Every time. They're handpicked, Katrina. That's the thing. That's the whole intention behind it. They're handpicked because they will, nod their heads and say, yes, this is, Dr. Kiri will say, yes, it's part of the treaty. She'll say all kinds of things to justify this stuff and make out that Māori, we've always had this as part of our culture. Never. It's never, ever, ever been part of our culture. There is no evidence. And she even admitted that, page 82 of her horrendous thesis, might I add.
Right, yes.
So, it's the same, like you're saying, Katrina, the same people that are handpicked, and consulted on this issue. And by the way, for this particular topic that we're discussing, they've been at this for 12 months. They're 12 months into an 18-month study, might I add.
Right. Right.
So, it's so much for us to unpick as well. Like I said, they've been at this for a year now. And they've still got a few months to go. They give us the information at the beginning of the week and say by the 21st of November, you can give us your submissions.
Yeah.
It's hard not to think that that is intentional.
Yes. Yeah. It's it raises the subject too of like, who is going to put in a written submission? It'll be, it'll be like, for example, we know that we've just heard that 50% of school leavers are functionally illiterate in New Zealand. The education system has fallen over so much that that's the state of literacy we now have in New Zealand with our school leavers. So who's going to put in a written submission in the 2 weeks or whatever that they're given, and articulate, suddenly get hit with this stuff? Because if a lot of people will be new, I mean, the likes of you and me, we've probably sort of got a few thoughts around it already, but it's going to be hit with this. They're going to have these thoughts in their heads, are like, oh, hang on, that doesn't seem right, but how do I articulate it? How do I format it into words and to put it into writing and then submit it? I mean, who's...
I know what you're saying. It's, even if you are literate, it's like I said, we're business. It's not like we get paid to do this stuff.
Yeah,
we do
exactly.
this for free.
Yeah.
It's not for love and money. It's because we see a need and we're trying to fill that need, And so, the same thing with the sex self-ID bill and the conversion therapy practices bill as well. They give us the details, and then they give us a ridiculous amount of time. Like, it's so, hardly any time to prepare to make, to make a submission.
Yeah, it's really unethical.
And so, it's incredibly unethical. They're doing this time and time and time and time again. So it definitely, as far as I can see, as far as we're concerned, it's definitely a pattern, an intentional pattern.
It seems to be, doesn't it? I mean, you can't help but think that when you see it repeated over and over, you can't help but think that they're doing this deliberately. I mean, they're no longer going to the people. They're making the people come to them. Now, I understand that it's easier to do that, rather than to actually sort of go out on the road or go out into community halls or whatever they do and get people talk to them. You've got to start taking things, I mean, especially for Māori, I mean, an oral culture,
Exactly.
I mean, the number of Māori who would write in about this, make a submission, would probably be sort of minimal compared to the ones who might actually turn up to a meeting about it and have a talk.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right. We're well known for having, hui after hui, but that's part of our culture. We've always, discussed, matters of import. That's always been part and parcel of our culture. That's, so that this ideology is like I said before, a contamination on our culture, but it's an affront our culture as well, because, you're making out that we're okay with just having one person speaking on our behalf, or telling, the world about our culture, which is, telling lies about our culture. And it's back to this idea that we can't see it in any other way other than intentional.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a colonization again. It's another, sorry, Katrina, but it's another colonization again.
Yes.
They're colonizing our language. They're removing the words, wahine and mama, and then saying, oh, that's Māori. That's because of the treaty. Māori have been giving birth well before the treaty ever existed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like it's most of the Māori women I've spoken to, and I will admit I don't know a lot, but they're very definite about the woman matters. I mean, and it does not just Māori. I mean, in many cultures, the woman matters. When the woman is pregnant and going to give birth, going to become a mother, the woman matters. The woman is centre.
It is. Yep. It is. So look, for us, it is the most sacred time in a woman's life. For us, it's not just about the physical. I mean, that's important. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, physically being hapu, being pregnant. it's also about, it's a spiritual aspect to it for us as well, Katrina, you know, that we take very, very seriously. You know, and, you know, like I said in the article that I wrote for, or that you kindly invited me to write for Speak Up for Women, you know, women are the house of humanity of the Māori world. You know, ko te wāhine te whare tangata o te ao Māori. He mea whakanui rātou I tōna mana whakawhānau oranga, you know. Women are the house of humanity of the Māori world, and they are venerated for creating life. Nothing to do with gender identity or gender affirmation or transgender. No. You know, these lies about our culture have got to stop. They really do. And so I'm not getting mad at you, by the way, Katrina.
No, I'm glad to see the passion behind it. I mean, as I said, that, you know, women need to get angry about this. They need to get that passion, because we go through the world. We experience the world through our bodies. That's the first thing we experience the world through. You know, it's our bodies. And if you've got a female body, you go through the world differently to a man, someone with a male body. You know, so
men don't know what we go through. They have no idea.
to start removing the words, you know, woman and mother. I mean, what an affront to women, an absolute affront. You know, I mean, as I said, women should be furious about it.
Absolutely.
You had something interesting the other day, which I saw that you posted. It was about what happens when you start taking the words away, and I think it related back to, was it Nazi Germany, I think, or something? They started taking words away, and that's how they sort of, can you remember what that said? Or
kind of. I posted it.
But it was very pertinent.
Well, what I was saying, firstly, you know, we believe in free speech for all, you know, not just for English speaking people, which is us too, but for all languages, you know, all tongues, for all people everywhere, free speech, you know. But, you know, how you control the people, Katrina, is you control the language.
Yes.
And that's why Nazi Germany did what they did.
Yes.
You know, I won't go too much into that.
And then of course, you know, like your own language, you know, it was tried to be eliminated. Yes.
Well, it was one of the first things they did was they you know, started on the children at school. You know, they beat anyone who dares, you know, any child who dared speak, you know, te reo, you know, and that's a fact. I know that some people like to say, oh, it wasn't, you know, around the world, you know, not just Māori in you know, in America, they were doing it to, you know, Indigenous in America, you know, Canada, our brothers and sisters in Canada are still, as far as I'm aware, digging up the bodies of, you know, children in schoolyards, and, you know, where they were taught, you know, they were horrendously abused. So that's how, you know, that's how we see the similarity too with this gender identity ideology, because they are indoctrinating the children.
Yes. Yes.
You see what I'm saying? So there's that link as well. But sorry, so just to keep on the language thing, you know, when you remove a language from, you know, when you remove someone's language, like just imagine if you couldn't speak, if you were told you were not allowed to speak English ever again, what does that do to you? What does that do to an entire nation, or even a family group, or you know, an iwi?
How do I go about in the world without being able to
speak? How do you even think?
Yeah.
You know, how do you think? So this is why they actually use that, Katrina, with Indigenous people, so that they could actually rip our culture out from us. You know, the intention was to kill us off. That was a stated intention.
I'm glad they didn't succeed.
Yeah, me too. We're still here.
So they and like Stuff News published an article about this, about the Midwifery Council's revised scope of practice guidelines, and they said tangata whenua held the view that whānau was a much more appropriate word to use instead of woman, which is philosophically consistent with Maturanga paradigms. Did I say that right? Or close enough?
No, that's okay. I know,
Okay.
close enough. Yep, I know what you mean.
Paradigms of holism in social structures. The idea that various systems should be viewed as wholes rather than as simply a collection of individual parts. So once again, it seems like they're saying that women should just subsume themselves into this whole thing, and not in sort of, like almost how we used to, like, women had to sacrifice themselves for everybody else. It almost seems like they're saying that women have got to sacrifice their identity, their individuality, their manner as women in giving birth and mothers into this, for the whole, to sacrifice themselves into the whole of the family.
At the end of the day, like, I read that, and getting back to what I was saying before, when I hear the word framework, I hear setup. To me, that's just their framework, and it's an academic one at that. And can I just say, while we're at it, Māori our culture was not created out of academia.
No.
So this idea that we have to take advice from academics that happen to be Māori on all of us, that's never how our culture has ever been run. Our culture's handed down to us from our elders, our kaumātua, and our rangatira. I'll just get that out of the way. But this tangata whenua, well, all of us, I certainly don't. Mana Wāhine Kōrero certainly don't hold this view. Have ever held this view that whānau was a much more appropriate word to use instead of woman. I call bullshit, is what I call, and I'm sorry to swear, but I'm trying to, I guess, at
swearing
least
appropriately.
Well, this is tapu stuff. They are encroaching on what we consider to be sacred.
And just for our viewers, you tell them what tangata whenua means?
Oh, people of the land. Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Essentially Māori. So tangata whenua held the view that whānau was a much more appropriate word to use than woman.
Yeah, it seems quite bizarre to me.
It's rubbish, absolute rubbish. And then they go on, which is philosophically consistent with Mātauranga paradigms of holism and social structures. That is academic rubbish.
That's right.
Parade as being Māori. Because would never speak like that.
Which person reading that? Just someone who's not in the circles where that sort of thing is said. Which person reading that would actually sort of know in the first time of reading it, saying, "Oh, I know what that means,"
That's which is philosophically consistent. When you give birth, it's not a philosophical act. No. It is raw. It is intense. You know that you're human, and you understand the importance of what you're doing. Not just for your pepe, but for your whakapapa. Well, that's how I felt anyway. Maybe not everyone feels that way. But, that's the importance for Māori. We understand that we are keeping our whakapapa, our genealogy, we're keeping our genealogy alive. And because we were almost near wiped off the face of the earth, that's really important to us. Saying that we've always believed, that whānau is a more appropriate word to use than, they say woman, it would have been wahine. Rubbish, absolute rubbish.
Seems to me that like there's this real academia or academic disconnection or disassociation, because as I said, I'm looking at these scope of practice, and I'll put the link below so other people can read it if they want to. The scope of practice, and I'm thinking now, how that's academic. It's all academic speak. It's not, to me, it's not like plain language speak, like someone who's like a person who has knows how to read will actually make much sense of that. And I'm thinking about, what about those people who have English as a second language? Those people who are low educated, for whatever reason, they're low educated. Will they come in and read that and think, oh yeah, okay, that's clear. I understand that. you know, I mean, I don't think so. As I said, doesn't mention the word woman or mother once anywhere amongst
That's right.
these guidelines. So how does a person coming in and reading that, although it's on the Midwifery Council's website, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people automatically understand that they are talking about women and mothers when women and mothers are not mentioned.
That's right. It makes no sense. And this is the other side to it too, from as far as, we're concerned, it's not just Māori women that give birth in New Zealand. All women give birth. Doesn't matter where they're from. And what if there are women, from other countries that have just arrived in New Zealand and they don't speak, English, like you said before. English is maybe not even their second language. This stuff would just be bewildering to them, I'm pretty sure, because it makes no sense. It's not appropriate. It's not even accurate. And it's all because of gender identity ideology, which, I can say for our culture, it's got nothing to do with our culture. I say it hasn't got anything to do with anyone's culture, but these, when you look at the original text and then the changed text, it's not just changed, it's
quite
morphed.
altered.
It's like it's like morphed into something that's got nothing to do with midwifery. So because there was something else, so I just wanted to here we go. So here's one example, right? One of the things we take issue with. So in the original text, the guidelines say the midwife understands, promotes, and facilitates the start again, Michelle. Hang on. Physiological. Physiological processes of pregnancy and childbirth, right? Now, that's to me, I think that's appropriate. And that's a wonderful, absolutely that's what, the midwife does. In the new text, it says, or the suggested one, it says fundamental to and then that word, kahupokai, midwife. So fundamental to a midwife's tikanga, expertise and knowledge is the understanding, promotion and facilitation, hang on, let me just enlarge that, it's better, promotion and facilitation of the physiological processes that support well-being. Now, why would every single midwife in New Zealand have, tikanga? Well, that's Māori. See what I'm saying? Like, maybe I'm not making my point. So what I'm trying to say is that it's like, and further down, here we go. So further down, right, in the new text, they're saying the midwife values mātauranga Māori and other world views to provide safe midwifery care that promotes whānau health and well-being. Well,
I see what you're saying there. It's like a contradiction in terms, isn't it? Other world views and then whānau health and well-being, which is it seems like it's a Māori.
Are you saying that's right? Like they're trying to. It's like they just, like you said before, they're trying to chuck everything in the big melting pot and go, yahoo! It's not going to work. That's not how that works. There's nothing even was mentioned there about, mothers and babies at all. No, nothing at all.
No, that's the other thing that's missing from here, isn't it? I didn't think about that before you said it. That could be because I'm not a parent, but babies. The word babies.
You would have caught on eventually, but Pepe's not even in there.
So mother, women, and babies are not even in there.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
It's just so far. It's to me like that's an extreme change. It's not even a change. It's like a complete morph. Like I said, it's just morphed into something that is not even related to midwifery. And it's certainly not related. I'll say this again till I'm blue in the face. It is not related to tikanga Māori. It's not related to Te Tiriti or the Treaty of Waitangi. It's not related to our culture whatsoever. And, for these people to go around saying, oh, it's part of the treaty. No, it's not. And again, we've been giving birth to Pepe, to our, to our lineage way before the treaty ever existed.
Yeah.
You know, so
what was now there was another thing I was going to. Oh yes. So in the obviously, you know, like as you said, you cited, is it Dr. George Parker? She who is a they them and non-binary, I think, Pakeha woman. I think that's how she describes herself.
yes.
And also in the Stuff article, and they finished off with for saying, now Beaumont, I think her name's Jay Beaumont, she seems to be a midwife in Christchurch, says using the word woman also excluded people who give birth and make use of midwifery services but do not identify as women. An estimate was done, and there are no records here in New Zealand that we can access to find out how many women give birth in New Zealand who don't identify as women. But basing it on Australian statistics, we estimated that around 6 women in New Zealand do that, and someone else estimated around 12. You know, so this seems to be what we're talking about, as women who don't identify as women, however still want a baby, but then don't like seeing the word woman written down somewhere.
Dr. Parker even said that, you know, some of the gender diverse whānau were saying that they didn't see pictures on the wall that they could relate to, or that, you know, represented them. Now, I'm telling you, Katrina, I've never heard any of my mates or whānau who have given birth, and I certainly didn't. I didn't, when I was about to give birth, look at the walls and go, oh, I don't feel represented because there's no pictures of me on the wall.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like that's what Dr. George Parker said in her videos. One of the reasons, you know, that they're trying to say that like the study that she's leading, that she's a lead investigator for, it's set up in 2 phases, she said. So phase 1 is finding, so getting back to where there's no stats for who is identifying as non-binary or whatever, giving birth. You know, so the first phase is actually finding these people that they believe that there's a problem with in midwifery. So they don't even have them. They've got to go out and find them, right?
Right, yes.
And then phase 2 targets all the perinatal workforce, all of them. Obstetricians, midwives, this is just the start. It's just the beginning. Obstetricians, radiographers, childbirth educators, neonatologists, you know, the list goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Doulas, I guess. So that's their phase 2. So their intention is to indoctrinate, you know, the entire, you know, perinatal workforce with gender identity affirmation ideology. And what? How many did you? 6 estimated 6 in New Zealand. And how many?
Yes.
You know,
estimated 6. As I said, one estimate was 6, one estimate was 12, but then but that 12 was the maximum that I've heard estimated.
Well, we know it's not thousands.
Yeah,
we know it's not millions.
That's out of about 60,000 births in New Zealand on average. You know, the last that might be in the last few years. They've estimated that 60,000 a year births, and out of that, somewhere between 6 and 12, according to the Australian, only taking Australian statistics, because that's all we've got to go on, and doing a ratio. Between 6 and 12. So that's you know, like what the language is changing for, or I should say who the language is changing for.
The entire approach is changing for them.
Yeah, and it's a bit sort of, you wonder why, because you think that normally when you put out especially public information, you put it out in the way that the most people will understand most of the time, and that's not happening here. And I should say at this point in time that we also have a college of midwives, and they are separate from the Midwifery Council.
Yeah,
and they are quite adamant that they do not want to erase the words woman and mother from any of their policies or publications or documents or narratives.
Thank goodness.
Yes. So, but I believe that, you know, like within the Midwifery Council, within these organisations, it seems to be like it is with a lot of organizations, a small group that have got into positions of some sort of authority, you know, and they're driving this, and the people who disagree get it's hard for them, you know, to disagree, because of the fact that then they start sort of risking careers and you know,
which
income,
is absolutely
like
ridiculous. Like no one
Yeah.
should be no one should feel that their job, that their career is on the line for simply stating, you know, observable facts, objective facts. You know, you don't have to be a doctor or a scientist to know that only women can give birth. That knowledge has been with humanity since time immemorial. You know,
Well, that's right. Yes, and I mean the word woman. I mean, you know, the word woman is rich with meaning. And, you know, it's got centuries of meaning behind it. You know, it's the most immediately sort of recognizable word that, well, one of the most immediately recognizable words that, you know, is around, and in any language you sort of understand. You know, you can often recognize the word mother or woman. Not always I understand that, but let's face it, they're one of the first words that you'd ever learn anyway.
Absolutely. The mother is, you know, and that's why I was saying, you know, for our culture, you know, women are venerated. You know, we are the house of humanity, and that's very important, because our pepe, our babies, and our tamariki and mokopuna, you know, our children, grandchildren, you know, we do nurture. That's our role as mothers. You know, nurturing the next generations.
Yeah. So I think about it, reminds me, I don't know if you've read this book called Invisible Woman by Caroline Criado Perez, I think.
Excellent. Highly recommend all your audience read it.
Yeah, It's a great book, isn't it? Yes.
Fantastic.
And it reminds me of this book, like, you know, how data for women was so lacking because they just weren't taken into account. And I think, well, how are they going to get taken into account when the words woman and mother get taken out of our narratives? I mean, it'll get worse, you know, than
that's right.
Than better.
And it goes back to that language thing I was saying. You know, imagine if you can't speak the English language. You're not allowed to speak it. You're not allowed to think it. You know what I mean? So then everything gets erased. That's how that happens. And, you know, this is exactly, you know, the erasure of wahine and mama and pepe as well. It's the erasure of our culture. That's how we see it, at least, at Mana Wāhine Kōrero.
Yeah. So what else? Oh, there was something else I was going to. Right. Oh, yes. And that was interesting, wasn't it? The number of response, like when the Midwifery Council put out the initial guidelines, and they got responses, and they got 224 responses, and of that 176 of them had concerns, and yet they still went ahead and put out these guidelines. Well, I mean, anyway, Michelle, this is
I was just going to say, I mean, at the minute they just propose guidelines, but the way that it's set up, they've got this framework, they've got their handpicked people, they've got the president of PATHA and the secretary of WPATH, you know, consulting on this. This is only going to go one way if people don't start standing up and speaking out, you know, and I urge absolutely everyone to be very, very clear, you know, take the time to do the reading. You know, it is a lot of reading, I must admit, and it's a lot to unpick, but, you know, don't be bamboozled by their academic, you know, corporate boardroom buzzwords, you know, and their approach, because it really is just masking what they really, really want to do. And that is to erase women, to erase women, basically, and our culture at the same time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think, you know, women, as I I've said a few times already, women have got to get furious, almost start shouting, you know, don't stay quiet. Yeah. No. Hey, look, Michelle, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise, Katrina. Thank you for, I love talking to you too. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, and look, we'll catch up again. This is not over.
Absolutely.
We'll be talking again sometime. Okay.
I'll be angry about something else again, I'm pretty sure, on this issue.
Oh, look forward to it. Absolutely look forward to it.
Yeah. Take care.
All right, you too. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Ka kite. Bye.
Bye.